My name is Kurt Maddox, and I was born in Poplar Bluff, Missouri in 1969.
Thank you. And who were your parents?
My parents were James W. Maddox and Ada Lee Maddox.
Tell me about your parents.
My dad was raised in Poplar Bluff, Missouri, actually, and he went to Drury College in Missouri and got his master's from there and actually became a teacher. And he was a high school counselor for many years after being a history and geography teacher. And that's actually how I came to Gravette. Was he got a job here in Gravette, and then my mom got a job after him as a music teacher. And that's kind of what brought me to Gravette the first time.
Tell me about your family. Who were your siblings?
I actually had 6 brothers and sisters, several of them. I've got an older brother that worked at J.B. Hunt for over 30 years, a sister who's also a teacher in the Hot Springs area, and I have a little brother that works for a vendor for Walmart, and then I have a sister that is in Tulsa area, and a younger brother that is an officer out in South Carolina.
Thank you. Tell me, what was it like growing up as a kid? Where did you live and what was it like?
I had a pretty, middle class growing up as a child. My dad was also a part-time pastor, and so we moved a few times when he would get another church, and he would try to get a teaching job also wherever he was at. So we moved from Missouri to Hope, Arkansas. Was there in Hope, Arkansas for a little while, then moved to Mahia, Texas for a short time, and then when I was in elementary school, moved to Fayetteville, Arkansas, and I started at Leverett Elementary in Fayetteville, and then went on to Ramey Junior High as my dad taught and pastored, and we actually drove from Fayetteville to Gravette every day when he took the position here.
Tell me, so whenever he got the job working in Gravette, you drove?
Yeah, we were living in Fayetteville.
So when did you come to Gravette? Tell me that story. When did you start here, and then when did you finish?
So my dad was teaching here, and I started in high school here, and went 2 years here in high school. Actually started my senior year here in football two-a-days, and my motor actually blew out on my car. And my dad had just left and went to Winslow, and so he said, "Wait, you just want to come to Winslow and finish out there?" And so I just went ahead and did that and finished my senior year at Winslow High School. And so I started here. My mom was still here in Gravette, so I could have went here and finished, but I went ahead and finished in Winslow.
So tell me, how did you end up back in Gravette and eventually become involved in politics here?
Well, actually, as I said, my mom was a teacher here. She stayed here for several more years after my dad left, and I actually met one of her choir students, and who is my current wife now, and her dad was the Methodist minister here in town at the time, and she came up with a friend one day. Her friend was going to sing at my father's church in Fayetteville, and that's actually how I met my current wife now, and ended up dating her and getting married, and have been married now for 33 years.
Congratulations. So what did the town look like when you first came here? About what year was it, and what do you remember of the town?
So in '85 is when I first came here, and the town, of course, was a lot smaller. I think it was under 1,000 people back then, and I remember very well when we used to run. They used to send us out jogging, the football team, and we'd run on the sidewalks. And there was an area of sidewalk down 2nd Avenue that was just all broken and torn up. And we, of course, we were young football players, didn't bother us any. But when I came back and ran for city council, the sidewalks were still the same. They were broken, and the city was still looked the same as it did back in '85 when I first came to high school back then.
So what year was this when you first ran?
So after high school, of course, my wife and I moved back to Gravette, and that would have been in the mid-90s. We moved back to Gravette for a little bit, and then we moved away and moved to Rogers area, bought a house there, lived there for a while. And actually we moved a lot because I would remodel homes and sell them. So I've lived in almost every town in Northwest Arkansas, from Fayetteville, Springdale, Rogers, Bentonville, Gravette, and then we moved back to Gravette back in the early 2000s, and bought a home here. And then we found some property and bought that property and built our home on the property that we now still live on.
So what were the issues when you came back in the early 2000s and eventually decided to run? Talk about that. What was the city like?
So the city was still small, not much different from Decatur or Sulphur or something like that. And what really got me to run the very first time was they were building a new high school, and I had heard, I happened to be at the meeting also getting my house approved, and I had heard what they had said would be the egress and access in and out of the bus barn area, and how that would be moved around town, and those minutes were never kept, and so that was kind of lost. And then I found out that the city was looking at moving City Hall off Main Street, and from my research I found out that's a terrible idea. When you move your city hall from your downtown area, it can actually kill a small town, and it did. And they ended up moving City Hall off, voting for it actually in December, right before I started my term in January, because two of the people that were starting their terms they knew wouldn't vote for it, and it actually destroyed Main Street for several years. We got down to where we only had just 2 or 3 businesses on Main Street.
So how did you turn that around? We turned that around by doing what?
So then ran for that and did that 2 terms as a city council member, and then came back and ran again in 2014 with one of the missions was to get Main Street revitalized, get City Hall back on Main Street. We wanted to get our roads fixed, our sidewalks fixed, our parks cleaned up. And so I ran, won, and we actually started working on that this office you're in right now. As part of that redo, we were able to sell our office at the time, our current office at the time, to a retail establishment, actually Taco Bell, and they bought that. And so now the city gets the tax base from that, and we were able to get back on Main Street and revitalize an old building on Main Street. And it brings, of course, you bring people in town who have to come to City Hall first, so it also helps the Main Street. And one thing I learned when I first got into office from the Bentonville mayor at the time, Bob McCaslin, was he said, you are judged first and foremost by what your Main Street looks like. Whether you've got businesses there or not, and whether it's a happening place or not, people judge a city by what that looks like. So we put a lot of focus into getting Main Street cleaned up, and as you can see now, Main Street is absolutely beautiful. We're one of the better looking Main Streets in a smaller city in the area.
Mayor, talk to me about some of the other Main Street successes besides City Hall.
Well, we redid the entire street. You used to have to walk up. It's actually very dangerous. You had to take 2 steps up on the north side of Main Street to get up into any of the buildings, and handicapped people had issues getting up there. We redid the entire thing all the way down to where there's handicap accessibility, and the biggest step you take is your normal curb step up on both sides of the road all the way down. So we redid a 10-foot sidewalk all the way down each side, and then redid the street also.
Mayor, you talked about the advice you got from Bentonville Mayor, former Mayor McCaslin.
Yeah.
Who are some of the others that you've met that you've learned from or gotten advice maybe through regional planning or other ways?
Yeah, so when I came into office, of course, I had never been mayor before, so naturally, Municipal League is a huge help to cities, and we're able to go to that. They have twice a year, and the first one in January is usually for newly elected officials, and so we go there, and you kind of start learning there, and that's where you meet multiple mayors around the state. And I've had the joy of being able to visit with many of them and learn from them. And now with the way technology has improved, we actually have now email systems through the municipal league that you can ask a question and you can get multiple mayors or CFOs from cities or planning departments help answer questions for you.
Talk about the growth of the city and Benton County since you've been in office and maybe even before.
Yeah, so I think 2010 we had about 2,300 people, a little over, and now I believe we're a little over 3,600 people now in the city limits of Gravette, and that's what's official. We've had some tremendous growth over the last couple of years since 2020, so we believe it's more than that. We think it's somewhere around 4,000 people now, or a little over in the city limits.
What about your business base here? Tell me about it.
So our business base, of course, the school is our largest employer, and the Gravette School District runs all the way to the Missouri border, all the way to the Oklahoma border, and then the Highlands and Bella Vista are also part of the Gravette School District. So we have a very large, especially land base school district, and then we have the hospital here and some other businesses around town that employ a lot of people. And then our retail is also picked up tremendously. In fact, in the last just 2 years, we've had Casey's Casey's gas station come in, a new Taco Bell come in, and 2 Dollar Generals come in, along with smaller Main Street businesses and that type of stuff that have come in too.
If you can, tell me what you know of or what you remember of your city back in the days, the early history of your city.
Yeah, so originally, of course, before Gravette was here, we had a little town called Nebo that was built, and actually if you head east back towards the I-49, when you head down in the valley, there's a little spring house there, and the entire little town of Nebo was built off of that spring house, and they used that for all the lots that were built in the Nebo area. And then in the late 1800s, 1893, a couple of Gravette brothers bought about 80 acres, I believe it is, and that's kind of how Gravette was founded, off of that 80 acres, and they started a city there, which ended up encompassing what's called the little town of Nebo. And what's funny is it was just a few years back, one of the weathermen on TV was saying, there's a storm system hitting Nebo, and nobody knew what that was. Well, still on their weather stuff, they had the little town of Nebo, which is actually kind of where I live now, on the hill I live on, was part of that original Gravette area before Gravette was formed.
So what was Nebo and then later Gravette like back in the early days?
Well, of course, like most towns back then, is horse and buggy, and no electricity to speak of, and the town has grown from there. And of course, actually, a lot of people don't know this too, that 71 highway used to come through Gravette, and so it'd come through Gravette up through Sulphur, and then on up the back, which are now called the back roads, up into Joplin, Missouri. And then there was a time that they moved 71 and took it through Bella Vista, and that actually took a lot of business from Gravette back then. There used to be a theater and a couple hotels and all that here, and all that was lost back whenever that got moved. And then now, come full circle, we now have I-49 that cuts right through the middle of our city now, and increased traffic in the last since that's open, last couple of years, has been significant. Including within the first 3 weeks of opening, we increased over 580 semi-trucks a day coming through our city limits. Yeah. And what the state didn't know, and we did talk to state about it, but that we thought that there would be a significant increase of traffic, and it ended up being that way because it was GPS. It's shorter if you're coming north from 412 Dallas area and you're heading to Joplin or Springfield. It cuts you off about 25 minutes to cut up 59 through Gravette and to hit I-49 north. So it's increased our traffic tremendously. Haven't seen the latest count. There hadn't been a count yet for 2023, but we know at least it went up about 2,200 cars a day after that open. Of that 2,200, 580 some of those were semis.
So this is creating a bottleneck?
Yep, creating a bottleneck here in town, which we're working on new stoplight and turning lane with the state for that. But the good thing is it's also helped our businesses too. They have increased and so it's helped on that part. But you also have a lot of highway issues and stoplight issues and stuff that come with that, and so your increase doesn't nearly offset the cost of putting that kind of infrastructure in that you are going to have to put in over time.
Interesting. You talked about earlier that before you got involved in politics here that you had some businesses that you did.
Yes, actually I've owned several. I started, as a kid, I would go, we lived in Fayetteville next to the university. We were actually on Garland Avenue, and I would actually shoot mistletoe out of trees with my BB gun, and I would go sell that at Christmas from apartment to apartment, going and selling little bags of mistletoe I'd make up for 50 cents or $1. And then I also would, when everybody would leave, all the students would leave, they could only carry what would fit in their car. So a lot of them would throw perfectly good TVs and stereos away, and I would end up grabbing those out of the trash can and reselling those when I was a little elementary kid, and went on from there. At 16, I started with a friend of mine cleaning apartment buildings in Fayetteville, and started doing that, and then started a commercial cleaning company, built that up to 100 and something employees, and sold that company several years back, and I've had a couple of online companies too, and a brace company called Captain Sports that I used to own and sold that. And then the latest one I sold was one out of Missouri I own called Controls and Electric Motor Company, and I had majority ownership of that, and we had a buyer from another state. It really fit well with what they were doing. They were focused on online, and we were focused on more brick and mortar, and they made a great offer, so it was a great fit for them, and they bought my percentage out of the company. And so now I'm just strictly mayor and don't own any companies, and kind of enjoying not owning a company for now. I'm sure I'll buy another one someday because that's kind of in my blood. But
oh, nice. So what do you've been kind of moved around a little bit, but what do you remember over the years about Benton County and how it's changed and grown?
Well, my wife and I, one of our houses we bought was actually in a place called Cambridge Park over in Rogers, and Cambridge Park was one of the up and coming places back before there was a movie theater, when Walnut Street was still a 2-lane road all the way to Dixieland, and you'd get your yearly craft fair, and it would be almost impossible to get around town for that weekend. And so we've seen a huge, growth in the entire area, and now we're seeing that spread, this way and head west towards Gravette, because you're just losing your ability to have places to grow that direction, and the lake is east, which is also very difficult. So we are seeing that natural overflow come our direction.
You mentioned earlier the impact of the interstate and the traffic through town.
Mm-hmm.
What about the other impact of now it's easier to get across the county to here by taking the interstate?
So I can actually get to Bentonville a lot quicker than someone in East Rogers can get to Bentonville, because once we hit the bypass, it's, I'm 10 minutes from being in Bentonville, and so it's no big deal when you got to go somewhere to go that direction. Excuse me.
Interesting.
You got me talking too much, and I just finished staff meeting too, so I just had a staff meeting for an hour. And
So one of the things that we've asked about is the impact of Walmart and the Walton family on
Mm-hmm.
Benton County. So what are some of the things that you've noticed here as mayor?
Of course, the trail system, Walmart's been very big on the trail system, and the city has, the council approved to jump on board with regional planning's future trail system, which would go through Gravette and on down south and connect back into the Razorback Greenway in Fayetteville. Of course, that's way out in the future, but they've started that process. And then we've recently worked with the mountain biking on the gravel roads. They're kind of coming into town anyway, so we've worked with one of the groups associated with them on getting a little area where they can kind of stop off, park, and it also gives them a area that they can scan and kind of see what businesses are in town and that type of stuff, because a lot of them are coming from out of state and they're really looking for destination to destination, and so that helps a lot of our local businesses to be able to have the mountain bikers stop in and purchase stuff and eat at our restaurants and that type of thing.
So are you seeing people coming in?
Yeah, we are seeing them usually more in the summertime, and it's increasing slowly in the area. They've actually had a couple of races, I guess I call them races, on the gravel roads that have come through town. And it's an adjustment, for everybody. It's an adjustment for, people living there and that type of stuff. But it's moved this direction. I believe we're now, the bike capital of the U.S. So it's Northwest Arkansas has become that, and that's.
Before I get into some of the final questions, what are some of the comments or observations that you have that you might want to make?
As far as?
About the city and its future and...
So, Gravette, of course, is a growing city. We're seeing a significant increase of people wanting to come into town. And we were fortunate enough, we applied for a lot of grants, and the voters passed back in 2016, they passed for us to get a bond. It was a little over $6 million. We combined that bond with applying for grants, got another $4.5 million in grants and donations, which have really helped us get as far as we have been able to get in getting our roads cleaned up, our sewer system improved, our parks cleaned up. Now we have maintenance programs on everything, so nothing gets back to the point it was back when we started all this. And recently we received on the community funds that the congressmen are able to do. We're supposed to receive $7.2 million, providing it's passed by Congress. It's got out of committee and it's now in the new budget for next year. So if we get that, that's a little over $7.2 million. That will be strictly for us to get sewer to the bypass. And along with that, if council passes it, we're going to take the 3/4 cent bond back out to the voters again to see if we can add another about $3.5 million to that, which should be exactly what we need to get sewer from Gravette all the way to I-49.
How important is water and sewer projects?
It's huge for growth, and a city lives and dies off of retail. A lot of people think it's property taxes, but it's not. Property taxes pretty much support your schools. The majority of your property taxes go to school, and then the county gets a tiny bit, and the city gets a much smaller amount. And we would not be able to survive off of property taxes at all. So it's really the retail that really makes the city function, that we're able to do everything we can do. And having that interstate availability, the state has already approved a new welcome center, and when that welcome center, you'll have to get off the bypass to go to that. It will also be a pretty neat, it's something that's never been done before. It'll be done as a tribute to Ife Jones. Excuse me. And so we're hoping when that opens that will also help with retail, and we're hoping that'll open about the same time we're able to get sewer out there too.
Nice. So that will be in the city limits?
Yes, yep. Sorry.
All right, Mayor, so if someone came to you and said, Mayor, tell me about your hometown, what's it like? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I would tell them, first and foremost, Gravette's called the heart of hometown America, and we really are. We are very family friendly. We have fantastic parks, nice hometown community here. We have lots of activities for people to do, including Christmas parade, yearly Gravette birthday that we have every August, second Saturday in August, and the community really comes out when needed. And anytime we've had a need, it's just a unique community, and it's a great place to live. And I think people who move here find that out pretty quick.
Thank you. If someone came to you and said, "Hey, tell me about Benton County," you know, maybe they had heard of Arkansas but didn't really know about Benton County, what would you tell them?
Well, we actually hear that a lot when I go on vacation. You know, people say Arkansas, and you'll run into someone say, "Well, once you live here, you'll see why people, when they move here, they call it the best kept secret." Is there's just something unique about living, especially in Northwest Arkansas, that people move here and they love. And some of them even tell you they've been here a couple of years. They don't even want to tell their friends because they want to keep it to themselves. You know, they want to keep the secret.
Good. So let's do one more. Let's do our favorite things.
Okay.
My favorite thing about Gravette is
well, I've kind of already told you that, but
we'll do these separately. So.
Okay. My favorite thing about Gravette is probably the community atmosphere that we have here. It's very inviting, and it just makes it a great place to live.
Same thing, Benton County. My favorite thing about Benton County?
My favorite thing about Benton County is it's really, it's kind of a secret. People don't realize how good Benton County is. And when I was living in Fayetteville, you know, my wife and I always thought Fayetteville or Washington County was the place to be until we moved to Benton County. And then we realized, oh wow, Benton County is kind of like a hidden gem.